Hello, welcome back everybody. My name is Literally Dead, and today we're going to pin all the heroes in King God Castle against each other and see who does the best individually in Chapter 1-15. Who does the best, who goes the furthest, and who will win/lose. Anyways, to make this happen, I wanted to make sure that this was as even of a match as possible, and I had to use a little bit of brain power for this one to really think about this and give each hero as even of an opportunity as possible. Let me go over a couple of rules. First off, there will be no hero lock heroes, for pretty obvious reasons, but I'm going to let you know some of them. For one, it'll be very hard to set them up in the first round because hero lock heroes do not summon on the first round. On top of that, it'll just be too complicated to get them as strong as I want them to be initially. Speaking of, they're not particularly strong to begin with, so they're obviously not going to go very far. Therefore, I thought it would be best to just straight up ignore them. Next up, let's talk about the team I'll be using for this. So I'll be using a hero lock team, and then with the singular hero I'll be testing, the relics I'll be running will be the Insignia, Shield, and Hero Relic. The altars I'll be running will be 15 Hero and 15 Greed. Basically, I'm doing this to guarantee a tier 3 hero when I do a run. I was planning on doing a tier 5, but even with this setup, I can't guarantee that I'll get a tier 5 for this, and for time's sake, I decided to ignore it and just go straight for like a tier 3, make it super simple, super easy. I decided to do 15 Hero, 15 Greed because other altars benefit specific heroes and are not used by other specific heroes. For example, the Mage altar is not helpful for heroes like Ian or Hela. I won't be using the Mask Relic because I want to evaluate how each hero does individually, and the Mask Relic kind of defeats that purpose. I also won't be using the Cross Relic because that gives a major advantage to the melee units and a major disadvantage to ranged units since the charge time brings enemies closer and ranged units tend to want to be far from units. I will have to be as consistent as possible and put all the heroes on the top left spot for the position. Tiebreakers will be determined by damage dealt in the round that they lost in, and if they win the round, tiebreakers will be determined by the most damage done in the bonus round. Awaken abilities. Some heroes have 2 awaken abilities, and I will take into account the awaken ability that takes the hero the furthest. RNG is a big factor of this too. I'll be doing 3 runs and using the very best runs out of the final result. Is it possible to get maybe a little bit further with better RNG, better positioning, better field positioning? Of course, but I'm not going to spend an hour on each hero. The best from 3 possible runs is good enough for me. It should be good enough for you too, because honestly it's not going to make a big difference. Also, to make this fair, I won't be using any more merges past round 1, equipment, medals, devil's proposals. Again, this is for consistency's sake. One last thing I'm going to mention is I'm not going to put heroes in any spots that give relic affixes. Again, this is for consistency. Ian doesn't benefit from speed, some heroes don't benefit from attack. It's just to put everyone on an even playing field. This is how they are in their vanilla state, minus the Insignia Relic, but that's just in damage increase overall. I think that's it. Sorry for all the explanation, but I wanted to I wanted to explain my thought process for this, and let me know down in the comments who you think will go down the furthest. I'll be 100% honest with you, you gotta watch this whole thing play out because you'd be surprised where some of these heroes land. Anyways, let's check out the results. Alright, so in last place we have Gidnil. Gidnil kinda sucks in this sense the spell shields aren't really useful and he doesn't do a lot of damage. I use his first awaken ability since it means he'll take less damage periodically, but it only activates when he loses a spell shield, so it's not very often. Also, his second one is absolutely useless for him, so he made it to round 10 with a score of 6,721. Next up is Kanak. I use Kanak's second awaken ability since he takes less and less damage the more he uses his ability, which Kanak needs because he's kinda not that good by himself. But he still gets the second to last spot, round 10, with a score of 8,574. Following that, we have Harang. I use his first awaken ability to do as much area damage as possible. Other than that, there's not much you can do with him since he's not the strongest by himself. He made it to round 10 with 9,124 damage in that round. After that, we have Priya. Her ability takes too long to activate and isn't very good range-wise. Her second awakened ability is useless to her in this situation, so I am using the first one. She made it to round 10 with a damage of 12,175. Aramis follows her. He does a lot of damage with his attack alone, and his ability, thanks to his second awakened ability, does a lot more damage. Unfortunately, he's very squishy and dies early, and that's why he dies in round 10, dealing 15,665 damage. Next up is Nira. Her attacks are pretty slow, especially when she's by herself. Anyways, I used her first awakened ability. Even though she's invisible for her second awakened ability, it's only for like a second and a half, and it's really not that helpful. She made it to round 10 and dealt 19,986 damage in that round. Following that, we have Agathe, where I used her second awakened ability because the first awakened ability only works when she's dead, so it doesn't seem very useful if you ask me. So she made it to round 13, dealing 7,590 damage. Following that, we have Rawhawk, who I used his first awakened ability to hit 2 enemies at once with his ability. He does pretty decent damage, but it's not enough. At some point he has to do 2 hits to kill enemies and he dies. However, he still made it to round 13, dealing 11,982 damage. After him we have Zoop Zoop. I used her second awakened ability because the bonus spell damage really helps. She's still too squishy to make it anywhere really far. She made it to round 14, dealing 9,939. After her we have Lionheart. He struggles because his ability doesn't reach a lot of enemies and he doesn't do a lot of damage. The pushback awaken ability does not help much, so I'm using the first one. He made it to round 14, dealing 10,138 damage. Following closely behind him is Rai. I used Rai's first awaken ability since when the doll dies, it explodes to deal area damage. This one's easily dependent on the blockades of the field, so I am not going to spend an hour getting the right one. She only gets 3 chances and this is how far she got. She made it to round 14, dealing 11,258. After that, I have Hanzi. I'm using Hanzi's second awakened ability because she will attack faster when she's standing still. Since she's by herself, she'll be still most of the round and will be up to 80% faster. Her first awakened ability is typically better, but is dependent on reaching max stacks, which isn't always guaranteed, especially with this. She made it to round 15 this time with 8,864 damage in that round. Next up is Yeon. Her ability will hit an enemy and bounce back to heal, which is very helpful. I used her first awakened ability because it deals area damage, which is also very helpful. But she still makes it only to round 15, dealing 10,217 damage. Next up is Bombi. I used his second awakened ability because it results in immediate damage. Although the first awakened ability is generally considered better, he's not fast enough to benefit from the damage dealt. He made it to round 15, and he dealt 11,310 damage in that round. Surprisingly, next up is Ophelia. As much as I like to shit on Ophelia, I'm pleasantly surprised with how well she did. I think her damage output and self-healing has greatly improved thanks to the buff she's gotten, and now she's kinda usable, or at least in this situation. She made it to round 15, dealing 12,152. Following very closely behind is Shelda. You gotta use her second awakened ability in this because the explosive shield to deal area damage is just pretty good. She made it to round 15, dealing 12,734. Next up is Hela. I used her first awakened ability because one of the meteors does more damage and more area damage, so it's pretty useful. She made it to round 15, dealing 14,988 damage. Very closely after is Taybec. I used his first awakened ability because he would be able to deal damage while charging his ability. His overall damage output is kind of like not that good, but surprisingly he still makes it to round 15, dealing 15,896 damage. After that is Tia. I used her first awakened ability because she can evade, and that's all I really need to say. But unfortunately, she doesn't make it that far as you think. She made it to round 15, dealing 17,346. 5 more rounds left to go, and this is the only hero to make it to round 16. We have Kathy. I used her second awakened ability because it does random damage, which is balanced with all of her bullets. Her other awakened ability puts all that damage into 1 bullet, and that's not going to be as helpful. And since it's random, it hits multiple enemies instead of just focusing on 2. That being said, she makes it to round 16, like I said earlier, doing 12,158 damage. Yeah, I don't know how I missed this. I forgot to do my Mara lines. Anyways, I'm using her second awakened ability because she can make a clone, which should be a meat shield, and do extra damage. She made it to round 17 and did 12,839 damage. After that, we have Mel. When Mel gets to her ability, she does really well, but she takes too much time and damage early when she's not using it, and that could cause her to struggle. I used her first awakened ability because it can extend her range with that initial line of attack, potentially hitting the backline enemies. For this one, she made it to round 17, dealing 14,436 damage. And then after that, we have Kayn. Cain straight up can only use his second awakened ability because the first one is straight up useless in this arbitrary test experiment thing whatever I'm doing. Anyways, his second awakened ability is really good because he can continuously use it as long as he kills with it. Since the goblins are pretty squishy, that makes it pretty easy for him. He makes it to round 18, dealing 10,992 damage in that round. After that, we have Behemoth. I'm using his first awakened ability because based on his tier for the run, the second awakened ability, it literally does nothing for him. Anyways, at least there's a temporary 35% damage reduction with the first one. The stun from his ability helps too because that's 1 to 3 less enemies that he's dealing with that's dealing damage to him. That being said, he just missed the boss, making it only to round 19, dealing 14,720. Another hero just shy of the boss is Ren. She can get a mighty block after using her ability, which is very important for her survivability. I'm also using her first awakened ability because the second one takes too long to activate. She made it to round 19, dealing 18,576. The first hero to make it to round 20, and we still got more than a dozen to go. We have Esthia. She can self-heal and get a damage boost, which is very helpful and will allow her to go much further than most ranged heroes. I used her second awakened ability because she can heal herself and get armor. Also, the first one is kind of useless in this. We actually have an exact tie. Tayson also made it to round 20, dealing 2,060 damage exactly. Like, what are the odds of that? Anyways, I used Tayson's second awakened ability because it serves as his saving grace and he instantly uses his ability on low HP. But again, I'm just so surprised that Tayson and Esthia both made it to round 20 and both dealt the exact amount of damage. Very weird. Moving on though, we have Zuo Bai. I used his second awakened ability because he can deal more damage with it. In this case, it's better to deal more damage and deal more hits because he doesn't kill at some point with his first awakened ability. He made it to round 20, dealing 2,752. Following up that, we have Draco. I'm using his second awakened ability because it allows him to use his ability much more often and deal much more damage. He'd probably benefit from being in the middle, but for the sake of consistency, he's gotta stay there. Anyways, he made it to round 20 as well, dealing 7,340 damage. After that, we have Rosette. Rose does well, very well actually, with targets with a ton of HP, but since all the enemies are pretty squishy, she might not benefit as well from it as you think. However, with her second awakened ability, if she kills with her ability, she goes back to full HP, which is really overpowered for this. And with that, she made it to round 20, dealing 9,363. With a score very, very close, we have Mercil. She literally self-heals and deals damage at the same time. Like, need I say more? Also, her first awakened ability is useless to her in this run, so I used the second one. She made it to round 20, dealing 9,783, like 400 points away from Rosette. Moving on, we have the top 10. We have Evan. His second awakened ability is good because it's like he's constantly using a micro version of his ability to do area damage. He'd probably benefit from being strategically placed in the middle or like strategically placed in general to deal as much damage as possible with his initial ability, but again, for the sake of consistency, he's gotta stay in the corner. He made it to round 20 as well, dealing 11,158 damage. After that, we have Daniel. Surprisingly, he makes it all the way to the boss. He's fairly tanky and can deal decent damage to goblins. I used his first awakened ability because he does a lot of initial damage to one-hit most enemies while getting MP recovery. He made it to round 20, dealing 12,672. And the last hero to just barely not be able to beat the chapter, we have Nibella. I used her first awakened ability because it's just way too good and does so much more damage than her other one. She made it to round 20, dealing 20,163, just barely didn't make it. Alright, now we have all the bonus challenge people. We have Yoel. For this, I used his first awakened ability because it'll cause his ability to last longer and he has decent area damage and HP recovery, which is very helpful the longer it's active. He doesn't necessarily do a lot of damage, but the crowd control along with his self-healing earned him this spot, and he's the first person to beat this chapter, and he dealt 8,966 damage on the bonus challenge. Next up is Baldur, aka Chad Brad Treeman. He is so bulky, he can deal damage, and he gets a fresh shield whenever he uses his ability again. A true Chad. I used his second awakened ability because the first one requires 2 Baldurs on the field and is kinda useless at that point. Anyways, again, he made it to the bonus challenge doing 14,320 damage. Right after that, I decided to do the Baldur Deer, and he also beat the chapter. I decided to do this one a little differently and put him in the left of the 3rd row. It won't change much, but that's the only way I was able to get his deer form out, and it's very different from the bear one. But like the bear form, I used the second awakened ability because the first one requires 2 Baldurs on the field. Anyways, again, he beat the chapter with the deer form and dealt 17,498 damage. After that though, we have Chang'e. Her first awaken ability is used for immediate ability activation that does 40% more damage than usual and has a huge range. She absolutely destroys this chapter. It's unbelievable. And as you can see right now, she just completely destroys the bonus challenge as well. She dealt 21,137 damage. Next one is third place, Círdan, the human Beyblade, and the most recent broken motherfucker to grace us with his high damage output. Well, here it is. Are you surprised? He hardly struggled with this and absolutely dominated the chapter. He again beat the chapter doing the bonus challenge, dealing 21,264 damage, which is surprisingly really close to Chang'e's damage, but I mean, he still won, so he deserves that third place spot. The runner-up, we have Zuo Yun. Typically his second awaken ability is far worse, but the attack HP drain makes it worth it and makes him go much further. Without it, he dies pretty early. Basically, once he starts his ability, he goes back to full HP. And because of that, he beat the chapter and dealt 27,520 damage to the bonus round. A lot of damage there, and he just completely earns that second place spot. But who does more damage than him? Well, guess what? It's fucking Ian. Who would have fucking guessed, right? I used his first awaken ability because it's just so broken. Ian is just so broken. Look, he doesn't even struggle with the Vase. I don't even think he struggled at all this run. He's just so insane, and he got nerfed again, and he still wins this by a landslide. He did 32,396 damage. This guy is insane, unstoppable, and you know what? Good for him. He won this challenge by a lot. Anyways, that's all I got for you guys. That just about does it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and if you do, maybe I'll make more content like this. Maybe I'll do this for chapter 2, and we'll go from there, right? Then we'll see chapter 3, chapter 4. We'll see what heroes are really good for what chapter, and what heroes aren't so good for a specific chapter. Alright, anyways, with that out of the way, I will see you guys later. Bye.